Hey everyone, welcome to the Merkinch Free Church YouTube channel for our Sunday series. My name is Chris Davidson and it's great that you join us here today. I just want to open by sharing something that I struggle with or I'm rubbish at, and that is waiting. I really suck at waiting. I hate queues. I struggle with even loading screens in computer games. One of the ideal situations for me is going into the View Cinema, getting my ticket from, the quick service kiosk thing, and going in and sitting down. And the minute my bum hits the seats, the trailers are finished and the movie starts. That's ideal to me because there's not any period of waiting there. And I think waiting is something we can all struggle with. That's why we have loads of these things like Now TV, Amazon Prime, where we just can absorb content at a never-ending rate for ourselves. And I have to be honest as well, my hatred of waiting has led me to do some stupid things, especially around finances, taking loans out to pay for something like now, and ending up paying more for it rather than being patient and actually saving, putting a little away now and again every month just to get what I want. I put myself into debt. And that's not uncommon. Actually, when credit cards were first launched in Britain, when they first hit our soil, their slogan was, "Takes the waiting out of wanting." So clearly, it's not just me that struggles with waiting. Clearly, it is something maybe you do too, but a large majority of the population really do struggle with the process of waiting. I remember one time it was quite amusing to me going into Starbucks. It was Costa, the retail park. And I love dogs. Me and my wife want to get a dog eventually, but we came in there and there was a wee dog sitting at this lady's side, and it was looked fed up. And I said, "Oh, can I pet your dog?" And she said, "I would rather you not, because he's training to be a guide dog, and this is to help him learn to wait and be patient." I thought, oh, what a poor puppy. It looked absolutely fed up. But she was trying to teach it an important skill or discipline in waiting, because this would help this dog do its role. And waiting is really difficult for us. That's why advertisement companies and all that exist, because they know if they can get in, it actually erodes our ability to wait, and we just want to get something there and then. How often have you seen a can of Coke advert or a Mars bar advert and thought, I want that right now? Or things on TV that look amazing, but they're overpriced, and we then fall into taking a payday loan to pay for it. And these payday loans have, on average, 3,000% interest. So they exist because as people, we're rubbish at waiting. We want things now. We want to keep moving forward, keep accumulating stuff. And in our passage we're about to read today is quite interesting, because one of the things that has been asked of Ruth is for her to now wait. So Kevin O'Tanis, one of our members here, is going to read Ruth for us. We're in chapter 3, and we're starting at verse 14. So if you have a Bible at home, the verses are the wee numbers at the side that pop up just above a word sometimes. So we're going to start at chapter 3, verse 14. And we're going to read into chapter 4, verse 6. So please, if you have a Bible, follow along at home. If not, it's going to appear on the screen. Again, as we always say, if you live in the South Keswick area of Inverness or Merkinch here and want a Bible, please reach out to us. We would love to gift you one. If you have children at home and you want a children's Bible, please get in touch. We'd love to give you one of those. If you've ever wanted to sit down and read the Bible with someone when lockdown gets lifted, the team here would gladly do that with you. Even go through Ruth, as we have been in a series here. But all that to say, if you have a Bible at home, please open at Ruth chapter 3, verse 14. And Kevin Otanis is going to read for us.
So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, Let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, Bring the garment you are wearing and hold it out. So she held it, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, How did you fare, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, These 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, You must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. She replied, Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the Redeemer, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz said, Turn aside, friend, sit down here. And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, Sit down here. So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling the parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, Buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. Then Boaz said, The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. Then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it.
Thanks, Kevin, for reading for us that part of Scripture today. So what we have here, following on from last week, is Boaz has agreed to redeem Ruth and Naomi by taking Ruth as his wife, which is great news. This is what we have been building to. This is what we have been looking forward to since almost the end of chapter 1, someone who could help these women. Because in this act of marrying Ruth, he is securing their future, he is securing their property, he is keeping their family home within their family. No one can suddenly swoop in, like we've said in previous sermons on this, and take away everything that was Ruth and Naomi's. Boaz is redeeming it all for them forever to stay within their care. And we've noticed last week that Ruth, during that late night meeting with Boaz, was just a straight talker, right? She was forward, bold, engaging, articulate. She spelled out why she should be redeemed by Boaz. She basically, if we could put it this way, laid all her cards on the table. Now, we shouldn't be shocked at this from Ruth, because ever since chapter 1, ever since her conversion, we have seen a boldness of character within this woman. No longer is Ruth clinging at the leg of Naomi, but she has been active. The minute they hit Bethlehem, Ruth went out seeking food, seeking work, put herself in a dangerous position to provide for her and Naomi, was direct with Boaz when they first met, showed how capable she was to Boaz's employees, and was quite comfortable in joining them for lunch. Ruth is one bold lady, and Ruth and Naomi know they need redeemed, as everything they have technically was not left to them in their husband's will, because at that time, in that culture, everything had to go to the next closest male heir. So they're in a very vulnerable position. And we've been looking at this text saying, there's Boaz, he is a redeemer. We hope that him and Ruth get together to make everything secure. Because Boaz, we've been learning, is honest, faithful, generous, God-loving, God-fearing. And as the writer puts it, he is a worthy man in chapter 2. What we might say today is Boaz is a catch. He's just a good lad. You wouldn't mind coming home and dating your daughter. And we saw last week that he was completely humbled by Ruth's proposal to him. He replied to her, "You could have kept the town, Ruth. You could have sought after younger men. You could have gone after richer men." But Ruth didn't want that. Ruth was seeking redemption, seeking her family's redemption, and that lay in Boaz's hands. So she pursued Boaz. And last week, Boaz agrees to marry Ruth and Naomi through this late meeting that they have, which meant that these women would have security, safety, rights, and a family and a future together. So there was a lot at stake. And in verse 14, we pick up this situation, as Kevin's read for us, where Ruth and Boaz wait till morning before they separate. And again here we show, the writer records for us a wee bit of insight into Boaz's character, because he says, you can't go home empty-handed. So he gives her some barley. And in this action, Boaz is giving Ruth and Naomi a sign of willingness to provide for them. He gives them 6 measures of barley, which sound a lot to me. I think if you were carb loading, you couldn't eat 6 measures of barley. This was him being generous again to them. So the bold Ruth goes home and does what any good daughter does. She has a good catch up with her mum, right? Just imagine her sitting down at the table, a cup of Tetley tea in her hand, and they have a talk. And Naomi says to Ruth in verse 18, "Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today." And the word here, "wait, my daughter," wait, jumps out and almost slaps us in the face, because the active, emboldened, straightforward, confident Ruth now suddenly has to take a back seat. The main character, in a sense, is removed from this scene in one sense. And that's hard, right? Because waiting is hard. We know that. Especially when it is urgent. It's even harder to wait when we really want something, when we know there's a lot on the line. How many of us would be happy to sit back in this situation? Your whole life, in one sense, is up for grabs here. How many of us would sit back and let Boaz take the lead? After all, they've only known each other for maybe 4 to 5 months. And one thing we have learned about Ruth reading this book is that she is a smart communicator. She's proven that in chapter 3 in her response to Boaz, where she used his own words from chapter 2 and applied them to her and his relationship. So she's sharp, she's a smart thinker, she is confident, capable, bold. She made a good case, she could make a good case for marrying Boaz. But she has to wait. I often think like this for this wee section. It's a bit like, the NHS hospitals where the waiting rooms, no one likes going into them, or your doctor's surgery waiting room, because when it's urgent, it is extremely difficult to wait. When we're in pain, it is extremely difficult to wait. That's why the NHS has guidelines for waiting rooms and such, because they know human responses in time of great need and urgency is not to wait, but to get going. But yet, that's exactly what Ruth, and to an extent Naomi, have to do here. They have to wait on an outcome that they're not involved in. And in this waiting, there's often 2 pitfalls that we can fall into in our hearts. that we don't catch a whiff of here from Ruth, but for us, we can fall into. One of them is being over-controlling. We try to power through, get involved in every small decision of every situation. For example, in this situation, like Ruth, if she was over-controlling, could power in, join Boaz, kind of take the lead, not play the passive part, but speak to the elders about her, how she feels her position, and just rule over everything. Now, this is dangerous because, being over-controlling is dangerous because every failure is our failure, or every negative outcome has something to do with the way we communicate it. So in our controlling, it becomes crushing on us, because not everyone has a 100% win rate in a debate or even in life. Being over-controlling like this is toxic because it cripples people around you as well. Like if Ruth was over-controlling in this, she would be crippling to Naomi and Boaz. Whereas if we're over-controlling, it can really be a negative outcome in our family. We want them to draw near, and actually what happens because we're over-controlling is we push them away. We want our kids to flourish, but because we micromanage them, they don't really think for themselves. An over-controlling nature is damaging. But we don't see that from Ruth here. She trusts. The second unhelpful reaction is fear, right? We can fear the outcomes, we can fear the situations, we can fear all the variables that are going on in this situation, especially around Ruth's life. Fear could look like this for Ruth. What happens if the other Redeemer goes for us, Naomi? She could ask. Or what happens if this guy does win and he's not like Moab? Or at worst, what happens, Naomi, if he takes us back to Moab? Or she could think like this: I wonder what Boaz is saying. Maybe he will forget this point or that point. What if Boaz has his own agenda that we don't know, Naomi? What happens if Boaz lets us down? Now, these are questions that all point to an underlying fear of this situation. This is, again, toxic because it's like going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And what we see is this type of fear in this situation erodes the character and trust of people around us, right? Naomi could turn on Boaz, who we know is generous, good, God-fearing, kind. We know his character because we've seen it. But her fear, rampant and out of control, could assassinate that character of Boaz, to the point where really she fears intimacy with anyone around her. Again, fear can damage trust. And these two reactions we don't get a whiff of for one fundamental reason, I believe. That in the swell of emotion that could be happening in this situation, in the fight of control, which always happens in every situation, in the battle room of fear, which we know all too well, faith in her God has stilled Ruth's emotions, has freed her from her control, and has triumphed over her fear, to the point where Ruth here isn't actually trusting in Boaz as her Redeemer, but she is trusting in her God as her great Redeemer. She knows her life and her times are in his hands, in God's hands. Which in one sense doesn't sound that comforting, but that's kind of a metaphor for God has picked her up like a father. That's the intimacy there. He has got her. He is holding her fast. And Ruth knows her God. She knows that he is a servant God, a great God, a loving God, a good God. That his character is comforting her in this time of waiting. And again, that's important for fear and control, right? Because sometimes we fear God because we don't know him. Or we try and control God because we don't realize how great he is. And this can lead to unhealthy Christianity, where we actually don't know the character of God, where we may live under fear, thinking, oh, God is a God who's just ready to smite us. Do you know what I mean? Or we think God isn't in control of everything, so we must control everything around us. Whereas if we have a right view of God's character, if we know him in the sense of how the Bible communicates him to us, we can have the stillness of Ruth in this situation when all is at stake. Because faith in God is freeing, empowering, and helps us be still and know that he is God in troubled times. Even when we think everything is going south, like everything is going wrong, when we look at a situation and think, man, what's happening here? God is still at work, working out his good purposes. We see that so clearly with Jesus Christ, don't we? His whole life, death, and resurrection are proof to us that God's character is steadfast. Jesus, in his life, was emboldened to live a life to please his Father, knowing that his will is perfect in his life. Even in that darkest moment on the cross, Jesus is still placing his faith in his Father. Right? He says on the cross, right before he dies, into your hands I commit my spirit. Jesus knew his Father would not let him down. Jesus had faith and trust in the character of God, which has all been proven right and true to do in his resurrection 3 days later. Now, through Jesus, the wonderful offer of the gospel is this, that we can experience new life. We can experience the stillness that Ruth is feeling in this troubled times, but it's only through knowing Jesus and knowing our Father in heaven. It's only by experiencing faith that we can clearly see the character of God, and that is ultimately freeing in our lives. But we do have a part to play. Just as Boaz and Ruth have parts to play in this scene here, in this narrative, we must confess our sin to Jesus. We must trust, exercise faith in times where fear and control would rise up in us. We must know and learn the character of God, so that in troubled times we can say, he is holding us fast, because we have a great Redeemer in Jesus Christ. Ruth is not consumed by fear or control because she is trusting in her Heavenly Father. And for us, we need to do the same. We need to trust in Jesus. Now, the narrative moves on quite quickly here. In the next section, with Boaz. And what we see in this section is a lot of Jewish tradition. For example, Boaz going to the gate of the town and sitting at a bench. This isn't like, the old dears who go and sit at the benches at the River Ness. This bench would be more like the town hall kind of meeting place at the gate of the city. That's kind of where business was done, where the elders met to discuss points of practice. So Boaz, by going there, the elders would naturally gather to him, and he can make his appeal. And we see that they do all gather, as well as this unknown man who is a closer redeemer to Ruth and Naomi. So he's closer to their family than Boaz, and he has a stronger right for all their possessions. And Boaz lays it out that he is willing to redeem them and claim their land. And the other unknown redeemer seems interested at this. He actually seems to want it for a moment until he hears that it's a package deal, right? It's the land, Ruth and Naomi, which is right, which is their custom, which is good for him to do. But we see that the inclusion of Ruth and Naomi seemed to swing this deal for this unknown Redeemer who rejects the proposal, and Boaz wins the day. In this moment, we see two things happening, right? We see the rejection from this unknown man, but we also start to see the formation of a new family with Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz, safe and secure. Now, I find this interesting because the unknown Redeemer rejects the offer purely on the inclusion of Naomi and Ruth. And his rejection of them seems to be out of his own self-interest, right? This unknown character puts his own stuff before doing what is right. He puts his own inheritance before doing what was actually commanded of him. His underlying thought is this: no way is Ruth and Naomi getting near my stuff. There's no way they're making a claim on my life and the way I do things. That's not happening. So he rejects these two amazing women offhand, and he rejects them because he wants to keep his things his way. Total winner for Boaz. Let's be clear here, yeah? He must have went away fist pumping the air after this meeting. But this is actually chilling, this kind of section, because so many people in our communities and around the world reject Jesus just as this man rejected Ruth and Naomi. So many people reject Jesus because they don't want him involved in their lives, near their stuff. Or even more sad, some people reject Jesus they haven't even taken the time to get to know. Just like this unknown man who rejected Ruth and Naomi out of hand, when we actually know they are both wonderful women. Ruth is faithful, caring, hardworking, loyal, and lovely. By almost every measurable standard, great. But rejected by this unknown man because he wants to protect his stuff, his life. I find this action chilling because we can do the same. We can put boundaries up in our lives where we were like, no, we don't want Jesus involved in that because that's mine. And in so we can reject Jesus completely. We like the sound of Jesus as Savior, as helper, as friend. We struggle with the claims of Jesus that he is Lord, God, Judge, Ruler, Sovereign. So we reject him because we want to keep our stuff to ourselves. And let me just put it in an almost less sort of illustration. It's like rejecting a banquet with Jesus to protect our own wee tin of beans. What's a tin of beans over a banquet? Jesus offers us hope. Jesus offers us redemption. Jesus offers us a new family. Jesus offers us himself as atonement for all the bad that we have done, all the sin, all the ugliness in our hearts. Jesus invites us to be members of his new family. Jesus gives us a new way to live that just isn't good for us, but actually impacts those around us. It's good for those around us. Jesus ultimately offers us his love, his care, to live for him. But like in this passage, if we're focused on the little we have now, we'll miss the banquet with Jesus. We're choosing a tin of beans over a banquet. Which sounds ludicrous, right? But so often that's what we do because we don't want Jesus involved in the deep hurts in our life. We don't want Jesus involved in the messiness of our life when he would gladly enter and help us in our fear, in our control, and bring peace. This unknown man here in this section reminds me of another character in the Bible who also we don't have a name for. It's not recorded for us. But he reminds me of the rich young ruler who came to Jesus in his lifetime and said, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" Which is a great question. And Jesus, after some discussion with him, asked him to sell all that he has and give it to the poor. And we see in this dialogue between Jesus and this rich young man that he couldn't do it. He actually went away sad. Why? Because this young rich ruler is like this unknown redeemer who is placing his own self-interest, his own inheritance, his own things, his own riches now over the treasures of heaven, which the most beautiful and most attractive treasure of heaven is Jesus himself. Let us not be like this unknown man in Ruth. Let's not be like the rich young ruler. Let us see Jesus clearly as he is in Scriptures. Let us learn the character of God of the Bible before rejecting him out of hand. Let us, and myself included, become more patient as we wait on the Lord, because we know he is good and he is great, that he can overcome our fears and our self-control with his great will. So above all today, I would ask you to see Jesus as he is, to see God as he is in the Bible before we make any decisions of rejecting him out of hand. Because let's be honest, we wouldn't do that to others around us. We normally give people the benefit of the doubt. We normally get to know people before we say we like them or not. Offer that same courtesy to Jesus. And if you would like a Bible to read, to learn about the character of God, who God is through the Gospels, through his word, please, as we said at the start, reach out to us. But we hope you've enjoyed our study in Ruth today, and we're going to conclude it next week together. I hope you have a great Sunday. Thank you.